when I sob it out, it will help, of course, but there's so many layers. The depths of the
Mm,
layers is very, very deep. And I think from what I can understand, I'm the first generation that is really connecting with this
hmm
because it was too painful for the other generations to do that. So I've had to titrate that grief. And I don't want to be responsible for all of it anymore. I've been very
mm.
clear with my boundaries in that way. However, there's still tendrils of it. And I know it's still there because as we're speaking of it, I can feel it in my body. So it's a constant, I think it's a constant invitation to go lower because when I go lower, then I can hear the sounds and the cries much more profoundly and I can meet them and I can do something with them. Otherwise, they just remain frozen.
Welcome to the Holistic Life Navigation Podcast, where we explore life through the lens of somatics. I'm Luis Mujica, a somatic educator who teaches people how to find safety in themselves. Your turn to learn begins now. Welcome back, Asha. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
It's always such a gift.
Mm. So I was saying to you, I've said this to you many times, and I'm going to say it again publicly. I have used the term going lower over and over and over and over again with myself, with my friends, with my wife, with my child, with my membership. And I'd always attach your name to it because you taught me this. You came into our membership and gave us a beautiful, beautiful presentation and really a healing. And in that, you shared that medicine of your elders, which is when you feel low, go lower. And it was so counterculture to what I know of in present day America, which is you feel lower, do something to stimulate out of that, do something to avoid that, go higher, reach higher, don't go low. So I wanted to just dive in first to the medicine and wisdom of get lower or go lower, and just tell us a little bit about that for people who are hearing it for the first time.
Yes, well, the image I get, it's always a vision that comes first, is Mother Earth's gorgeous, warm soil. That is when I am struggling and feel that system, it's like a system energy that pulls me out of that or tries to pull me out of that.
Mm,
Then I feel that soil and the
mm,
soil. And she speaks to me and she says, can you get lower? Can you sink down? Can you fall down? Can you surrender down? Because your body is innately calling you to get lower, not to go higher. But this was after so many years of leaving my body or flying out. Not that I think there's anything wrong with that. There was medicine there too, but I think that was my response to what was pulling me out of myself. So get lower has been a daily practice. It's a daily, sometimes hourly practice because that's what my body calls me to do. And when I listen to that soil call, the nature of that, yeah, get low and sink
mm.
down, then I feel like I heal.
I love that you brought the soil in. The soil is so special to me, like dark, black, brown. Sometimes it's red. Sometimes it's, light clay, gray, but so warm and so nurturing and so much grows in it. And I recently wrote a song, and one of the lyrics was, "Nature knows how to transmute the violence through her vulnerable earth." And there's something about vulnerability meeting violence with earth, even I think like a shovel digging into it, that actually brings fertility. It does the opposite that you'd think. So if we're using this, I want to say metaphor, but it's reality of earth. If we're using this earth reality with our earthly bodies, what happens for you when you go lower, when you sink into the fatigue, illness, slowness, sadness? What happens for you when you go into that more?
Sometimes it's as simple as lying on the couch for 5 or 10 minutes when I'm feeling so exhausted. And I notice I used to just push through that every single day and ignore my body completely. So sometimes it's honoring for my body to say, I'm here, I love you, I'm listening here, I'm meeting your call. And then if I go lower into the pain, I do think it feels like the transmutation or the alchemy starts to come alive. So that is like that soil alchemy. The mycelium may be beneath the soil coming alive to nourish me, to say, you're not alone here, and I hear you. And I can only meet you when you go lower. I can't
Mhm.
meet you in the same way if you're flying out of your body. So it's definitely been a healing process and a part of my evolution to go lower and to listen, but I feel like my body feels loved when I listen and I do that.
I can only meet you when I go lower. I just wanted to land there to
Mm,
go into that 'cause that's such a beautiful reality for me. And recently, in the groups that I host or lead or facilitate, we've been playing with when there's this pain in there, or this sadness, or this slowness, or whatever it is, when you lay it down and you hold it, it comes up to meet you and you lay down into it. And it's this really intimate, almost merging of these two beings, me, conscious energy, spirit, with body that's, let's say, tired or sick or scared.
mm,
And so there's something so relational about going lower.
mm,
Uh, and that other medicine you were talking about of leaving the body, of maybe bypassing, of maybe stimulating yourself to seem like you're there and you have energy, but really it's just a temporary stimulus. Uh, that's a medicine too. And it's, for me, it's not as relational. It's more of like a strategy to
mm,
survive,
mhm.
situations. But the relational component is different. Could you speak about that difference of the strategy to get through it when you're bypassing compared to going lower and relating to the state?
For me, I think that soaring out of my body or flying out of, that's what it feels like. It feels like my wings take me out. I think it was unconscious because I've been doing it ever since I've had really like bad flare-ups or chronic pain since my teens. So I wasn't conscious about what was happening, but it was survival. It's purely survival. Maybe not, that's not true for everyone, but it was purely survival. And I'll still do it. I'll still do it because that's where my system can go if I forget that the
Mm,
soil and the land says, but this is where I'm going to meet you. This is where I can nourish you. I can forget that. So I love that you say that that resonates so deeply, the relational aspect. And from my indigenous body, the relational aspect is what is going to mend. It's going to tend. And a part of me had forgotten that, I think, when
mm,
I bypassed that and soared up.
that's so profound. I, I have a question about circumstance, but before I get there, I wanted you just to tell the audience, if they're not familiar, when you talk about flare-ups, when you talk about chronic illness, slowness, can you just explain your experience, your body? Well, what is it you're talking about exactly?
Mhm. So when I was 17, I was diagnosed with lupus. And over the years, I think the chronic pain has had those flare-ups, and many days I have experience of chronic pain in different ways. And yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a journey to come home to my body and to connect to my body and stay here. I think it's truly to stay here. And it's still with me. It's still with me.
And you got diagnosed at 17. How long were you experiencing symptoms?
I remember I had something called Raynaud's in my fingers when I was in
Mhm.
grade 6.
Mm,
So
mhm.
I think the symptoms started presenting themselves earlier on. And then as we know, that stress, something initiates it and triggers it. And that really happened for me in my late teens when it came fully into expression.
And if I ask anything you don't want to answer, just tell me that.
Yeah.
Um, is this inherited from, is there anyone in your family that has it? I'm curious.
Yes, my aunt had lupus. She actually passed away from complications from lupus. And my sister was diagnosed with discoid lupus, which was on her skin only.
Hmm.
And a medicine person actually told my mother at the time, because she was diagnosed, and then years later I was, that I had taken that illness on for her. So that's been always an interesting part of my journey, and she doesn't have it any longer. So yeah, I've been reflecting on that a lot in ceremony and in my healing work over the years.
So this is what interests me because, I see everything animistically, similar to
Mhm,
how you do,
mhm,
and illness is a being for me. And I don't say that to fluff it up. It's a painful, difficult being, and it's a being. It's
Mhm.
beyond you. It's another creature that's moving through you, that lives in you. It's how I see it. And I wonder for you, when you think of that being of lupus,
Mhm.
how have you connected that? How have you traced that through lineage trauma? Especially being Indigenous in Canada with residential schools and such. Is there a correlation for you?
The impacts of residential school, what I know to be true about this is for Indigenous people on a cultural level, cultural trauma wise, we have internalized that so deeply. And I think that we've internalized, we haven't expressed that outwards. And I do think I see lupus as a war within my body at times, and my inability to express that outward, to express that anger. And I've seen that a lot with my people actually, is there's this internalization, we soak it up, and then it just all of that goes on inside. So I think in my lineage with the residential school trauma, and I think just the fracturing of the language and the culture and the medicine, there is this I think it's shame. I think it's rooted in shame and the
Mm.
inability to express oneself, to be connected to the roots, to be connected to the go lower even. Like it's like, no, you're not allowed to. We're just going to colonize you out of this, from this, disconnect you. That's what it feels like to me. That's what the spirit of that illness feels like to me.
I feel it in my belly and in my chest. The part that I really feel is that profound notion of the war inside. My body has the inability to express, so it represses. It doesn't explode, it implodes. And I've seen this with so many people, myself, especially when I used to be, my personality was 100% fawning in the past. So I didn't know how to even express my yes or my no, honestly. And those expressions have to go somewhere inside of you when they don't come out of you. So if I think of this like echo of some of your ancestors' violence and pain and angst and inability to fight back, these different things, the echo of that in the body, one way that echo shows itself is it implodes to survive. Because if your ancestors were in situations of anger, it might have cost them their lives,
Mhm.
and that's the whole purpose of the fawning mechanism. So I'm grateful we're talking about this, and I'm cognizant that it can be activating. So I just wonder how your body's doing as we're saying it.
I just have remembering of the work that I've done over the years with this. So I hear the screams, the shrieks, the sobs, the grieving. That's where I always hear that in my womb space. That's where it tends to go. So it's my creation center. That's not where my symptoms manifest, but it's the core of me. It is my creation for perhaps even what my cells are doing, what my water's doing, what my all my internal energy is doing. So that's what I hear as we speak of this. It's those ancestral cries, and it feels like such deep grief, like bone aching grief, that when I sob it out, it will help, of course, but there's so many layers. The depths of the
Mm.
layers is very, very deep. And I think from what I can understand, I'm the first generation that is really connecting with this
Hmm.
because it was too painful for the other generations to do that. So I've had to titrate that grief. And I don't want to be responsible for all of it anymore. I've been very
Mm.
clear with my boundaries in that way. However, there's still tendrils of it. And I know it's still there because as we're speaking of it, I can feel it in my body. So it's a constant I think it's a constant invitation to go lower because when I go lower, then I can hear the sounds and the cries much more profoundly and I can meet them and I can do something with them. Otherwise, they just remain frozen.
So you just said something really important to me. You said, I don't want to take on 100% of that responsibility anymore. I'm getting really good with having this boundary. That's
Mhm.
really important for me and anyone listening to hear, because there's a lot of concepts, especially with historical lineage ancestral trauma and those conversations in circles, that um, let me think of the way people say it. It's like, I'm the one that's going to heal my lineage. There's that statement,
Yeah.
and it's such a burden to accept the pain of all your ancestors into your body. And so I would love to hear I would like to hear your journey a bit about that. If you started with that same kind of identity and was trying to take that on, and when did it shift for you where you realized this isn't all mine? It might land in me, but it's not 100% mine to have to do something about. Even the notion of meeting it speaks to it's not yours. It lives in your body, but it's not your even experience in its lifetime fully. And you meet it. Can you just break that down for me a little bit?
Yeah, I think it came into my awareness when I would feel things in my body that my grandfather was feeling in his body. He had really bad rheumatoid arthritis, and I would wake up with a very similar pain, and it
Mm,
felt like things were breaking. And then I would hear my grandmother tell my mother, "This is what's happening with your father." And I would think, I had that same pain 2 nights ago. So I started just thinking, what is going on here? What am I taking? What am I transmuting through my own body? And even with my aunt, her journey was really quite, um, I don't know, I was just very present with that. So I started to feel this burden almost of all of that on my shoulders. And I tend to be a highly responsible person. My nature is responsible. And I thought this is probably not a good setup for, me to come in as a soul and be, I'll take it on for all of you.
totally.
Yeah, so I think I had to make a choice. It didn't happen that long ago. I think I wasn't aware of I think there was a aspect of martyrdom or something in that
Hmm.
was really tied in, or even over responsibility, as my Capricorn moon tends to be. I think I really felt like I'm the one to do this.
Hmm.
And then I thought, I want to be here for a long time. I have so much here to do. I feel that so profoundly. I say it every single day. I just feel like I want to be here for a long time. I want to be here for my children. So, what choice do I have to make then? Am I going to spend my life, the rest of my life, transmuting all of this pain through my physical body? Or can I do what is mine to take and move it through? I have I kind of feel like it's one little body. I can only do so much. So I've made a conscious
Yeah.
choice. But I'd say it was actually when my book came out. When I was writing my book,
Mm.
that was about the time that I felt like I couldn't take it anymore with me.
Oof. That opens my heart so much. Um, because I'm thinking of, as a nutritionist, I'm thinking of the concept of epigenetics and how certain foods unlock certain DNA patterns and gene patterns. And so let's say, to make it really simple for people listening who aren't familiar with it, you can have a can of soda and that turns on the gene for diabetes, let's say. Or you could eat broccoli, that turns off the gene for diabetes. So food and land and relationship can literally transform your genetic expressions, which is brilliant because we always thought that genes were just this death sentence. That that's how they were. There was no change. I see inherited trauma the same way because if your only attunement to your ancestors are their oppression, then your DNA and your genes are expressing their oppression in your life where you have more freedom than they did.
Mm,
So, what's it like to attune to their gifts, to
mhm.
their resilience, their medicine? What survived in you that gives you the capacity to attune to the other? What has that been like? When I say that, how does that land?
Yeah, I feel like, again, I don't know what it was about birthing my book. There was something there that really, maybe it was when I wrote it, and I could feel the depth of the ancestral gifts that were flowing through me. It was
Mm,
like all of a sudden my capacity to feel into that was so much more profound than the wounding and the oppression. I wrote about those things too, but it felt like I was writing from a different perspective. It was just
mhm.
like this, like a storytelling. This is a storytelling, but this
Yes.
is what's birthing through me. It's the wisdom and the resilience and the medicine and the all of those beautiful the words and the songs. I've always felt that connection to them, but putting them into the world on paper solidified it for me.
Mm,
So I'm with you. I think I've always believed those things, and I think the scale tipped a little bit more on that I was carrying that oppression. And you're right. As I'm listening to you, I think the lupus has that thread of that. I've never believed either that if you have an illness that's going to be passed down to the subsequent generations. I think it's interesting that we have this woven through my sister and my aunt. And I think it probably lived in all of our wounds. And
mhm,
as I connect to that, I think I'm clearing it forward
mhm,
back. I really love
mhm.
that.
Hey, my friends. I created a space that is affordable, accessible, and anyone is allowed to join anytime, and it's called the Library Membership. The Library Membership is an online private platform that hosts dozens of my webinars, my somatic practices, private mini lectures, and movement practices. There's also a monthly sound healing, and you'll be invited to a weekly Tuesday live mini practice with me and other participants. You'll also be invited to be a live audience member in our monthly HLN team podcast recordings, where you'll take place in the Q&A that happens off air after the episode is filmed. For more information on this membership, click on the link below or go to holisticlifenavigation.com and click on membership and then library. You can join right now and you can cancel or pause your subscription at any time. I look forward to seeing you in there. It's interesting that this started shifting when you wrote your book, because if I think you said something earlier I thought was important to highlight, where you're the first generation in your family since a lot of the cultural trauma, where you've had the ability and the resources and the capacity to actually look at the cultural trauma and renegotiate some of it. Um, that's an important thing, because for a lot of us, we are the first generation of our lineage to say, whoa, I'm carrying this, to identify it, rather than live under it in that heavy way where we have to resort to alcohol or drugs or dissociation all the time. It's such a privilege and a gift to be born in a time where we're being rewarded, with an audience and people that want to work with us because we work with our pain.
Mhm.
Um, so I wanted to say that out loud. And I wanted to say it's no wonder something shifted in you with the book, because you're the first in your lineage to express your medicine. And if I think one of the most traumatic pieces of colonization is the repression of the expression of the culture. So here you are expressing and sharing your culture worldwide through a book from an ancestry that was once legally and physically kept from doing so. Have you considered that kind of renegotiation?
Ooh, I did in the writing more through terror that I was
Yeah,
so
I bet.
terrified of what the response would be. So that work within that 18 months of the writing and then the sharing of it, I went through huge healing around that because I was terrified of what people would think, mostly Indigenous people, and what they would say and how they would feel about that. And I could feel that really deep. It wasn't all, that was not all mine. Like I could feel that
Mm-hmm.
really culturally. So yeah, I think that it's beautiful. I want to celebrate myself in this moment, as you said that, because that was a huge journey. Yet I don't know if I've been in a place necessarily to take a breath and root in and think, I did that. That
Mm-hmm.
was a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
I did that and I'm still here. Yeah, I'm still here and I'm still listening to the wisdom of my ancestors. I'm still listening to the wisdom of my own being to share. So it's been a beautiful journey.
Let's celebrate you right now. Let's take a moment to feel that statement you just said. I did it and I'm still here. Like, how does that land in your body to say that to me?
Mm. When we first started talking, I saw this image of a cocoon. So it feels like a butterfly. I feel like a butterfly as I claim that. There's an opening, a freedom. There's a
Mm,
freedom.
mm,
And there are moments where I feel very free in my physical body. And I'm grateful for those moments.
Have you found freedom simultaneously while experiencing pain and flare-ups?
Mm. Yes. I think what we were talking about at the beginning, the getting lower. I think when I would not meet the pain or I wouldn't get lower, I wouldn't go to the soil, I suffered more.
Mm,
So I think there was freedom. I keep getting this image of like all that's beneath the soil, and there's all this magic, and they're like, we're here. And it feels like that mineralization or that
mm,
really deep nourishment. And that creates flow and it creates ease and it creates movement for me. So I definitely think that practice has really helped me to be with pain and also feel free. And to me, that feels like spaciousness in my body.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm just, my mind is bringing me so many places right now. I love how there can be spaciousness in the body from even feeling pain or in response to pain, because that to me is the difference somatically between pain and suffering. The
Mm.
suffering is like I'm constricting against the pain and it's just getting louder. And the not suffering but having pain is, oh, there's the pain and I'm expanding into it. So the pain might not go away, but it merges with me. It doesn't become an exiled place or a shamed place, right? It's a place that I welcome and meet into the experience. And I guess when I say that with a question of, is that how you experience it sometimes? Does it feel like it's being welcomed into you more, and then something shifts in the intensity? Tell me a bit about that somatically.
I think perhaps something shifts into the medicine of it. I don't necessarily know, but the intensity, sometimes that remains the same.
Hmm.
But I think I can find the medicine in it. And some of that work has been through the work with David Bedrick. And I mention his name because he's a deep mentor and teacher of mine. And he's helped me to find the medicine in those places, sometimes where I couldn't find them. And those times I would be in despair because I couldn't see them and I couldn't feel them. So when they're medicine, then I can understand them a little bit more, or my spirit can integrate it a little bit more, or it
Mm.
feels like there's hope, perhaps.
Do you
So
have, are you open to sharing one thread of medicine, something particular that came through from the pain? Because I think those listening that are in pain right now or ill right now, they might think, what does she mean by medicine?
mm, I'm trying to think. I've had so many different elements or aspects of pain in my body.
Yeah.
Um, I think, okay, so one of the things I would get flare-ups in my lungs of pleurisy. So it would be like something stabbing me, or I couldn't breathe in, and it would be so
Mm,
painful, and I'd have to sit up straight. I couldn't sleep at night because if I would lie down, the pain would get worse.
mm,
So really connecting to, at the time I was like, it was like somebody standing and stomping on my back.
mm,
And then they're pushing they're pushing me closed and I can't breathe and my lungs can't take up space. So we worked with that energy of
mm.
stomping on the earth and stomping on something like that oppression.
Yeah.
And what would it be like um, to kind of get that oppression out of my being? So that became medicine, that stomping on my lungs and that piercing. I transmuted that or alchemized that into medicine. And what I stomped out into the earth became flowers. It
Mm,
became growth. It became
mm.
beauty. So, yeah, something like
Ooh,
that really helps me.
that's so cool. You know, when I studied herbalism, there were these characteristics of certain herbs. One was mullein. Interesting that it's coming to mind because the lungs.
Mhm.
And one of Mullen's favorite places is disturbed soil. And so when you just said that, you know, and what came from the stomping were flowers, it goes back to that lyric that came through me about nature knows how to transmute the violence through her vulnerable dirt. And that transmutation is when you disturb this, for whatever reason, when soil gets permeated, violated, disturbed, it responds with more life.
Yes.
It right? It lets these dormant seeds breathe and get sun and get moisture from the rain, and something grows. So that's powerful that you externalized the oppression that your lungs were experiencing from your own, you know, autoimmune is really a self kind of a self fight of the body. And so you expressed that and it transformed into something else. That's really potent, Asha.
Yeah, that I've done that over and over again in those spaces, and they've always been so powerful. And because I was a homeopath for 15 years, so for
Ooh.
me, it would also
Hmm.
come in the form sometimes of energetic medicine in that way through a plant or an animal or a mineral, however that would come. And many times it would be piercing. That's a sensation that's very common for my body to experience. And many times that piercing would come like a poison dart. So there's a remedy called curare. It's a poison
Hmm.
from the jungle. Um, So when I turn that medicine into, now I'm using this, now the arrow is
Mhm.
going like out, probably in my expression or my anger, it becomes really powerful medicine. So
Mhm.
some things that
Mhm.
would weave through sometimes would weave through in these really profound ways where then I could take a remedy that would help and I'd know what to take because I could really feel it in the energy around me.
Yeah. Oof. I'm loving this so much. A question is emerging, and the question is, how do you personally hold your awareness that a lot of this internal piercing and stomping and pressing come from these ancestral cultural wounds?
Mhm.
How do you hold that that lives in you in this lifetime? And you're learning from it, you're meeting it, you're relating to it, and you don't become bitter. You don't become angry. You don't become hateful to any culture or side or race or group, at least from what I've ever seen with you. Did you at one point have to work through that? Has it never been your way? I mean, how have you held that? Because it'd be easy to be bitter and angry to think, I inherited someone's violence to my people. Like, how do you hold that with so much kindness?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I don't think I've ever felt angry. I was reading yesterday this person saying she was reflecting on somebody and she said, well, he holds the grandfather teaching of love. And I thought, oh, yes, that's what I do. That seems to
Mm,
be my way. She was talking about how she held the teaching of truth and this person held it of love. And I thought, that's true for me too. That's just my way in the world. And that's where it comes from. And my heart can't be any other way. And sometimes that probably means that I who maybe harm myself in some ways. I'm
mm,
not sure, but it really feels authentic for me to walk gently and kindly in that way and know that relational piece is so important. I think I believe in mending and tending and repair so deeply to the core of my being. And that is definitely a value that's been with me since birth, I think.
So, how have you navigated the difference, as you've aged and become even more wise and have boundaries? How have you navigated the difference between my authentic kindness and
Mhm.
my repression of how I really feel? Like,
Mm.
have you been able to pull those apart? What's that been like?
Well, my body is very clear. My body screams
Mm,
when, for me, it's about boundaries. We spoke about that, the fawning, I when I can lean into that, the boundaries become really clear because my body, I can't breathe. Like I feel that oppression instantly. I feel the
hmm
piercing instantly. It
hmm
takes my breath away instantly. So then the kindness has to be offered to myself. So it would be, is this kind for you to say yes to this? Is this kind for you not to speak up for this? Like how can you be kind to yourself in this moment? So it's not that I'm not truthful or honest or have conversations with folks that we need to have.
hmm
Um, because kindness from my body is really important too now, but it never used to be that way. That's taken a long time to come to that point where I matter.
See, that's a beautiful way to say it is kindness is authentic to you, holistic kindness, kindness for you, kindness for the other. Because a lot of people experience who live in the fawn response, they experience the identity of I'm a nice person,
Mm.
but the niceness is never felt for themselves. It's only felt for the other at the expense of self. So the fact that you're able to vacillate between, is this kind for me? No, okay, I'm going to redirect this kindness to myself. That's a really gorgeous piece to share for us, to
Mm.
see that difference. Um, I think what's beautiful about you and what makes your work so profound, there are people that really understand pain and understand suffering and understand medicine, and they speak it beautifully and they write about it beautifully and teach it beautifully. And then there's those, I'll put myself in this group with you, that experience something, and from the experience, the medicine comes through, and then we teach it from our own bodies.
Mhm.
And you teach this from a body that you can't control when there's going to be a flare up, or
Mhm.
when you might have to go to the hospital, or when you're tired, or when you have to sleep for days. How have you navigated an unpredictable body like that with being in the world and having dates and things on your schedule and books and podcasts and live sessions and cultural healing circles and events where you're on stage talking to hundreds of people. Like, tell us, because I was saying earlier about circumstance.
Mhm.
People listening might think, "Oh, that's great, but I have to work." But you do too. So how do you hold that? What's that been like?
Ooh. It's been a challenge. I wish I could say, oh, I've got it all down and I'm really great at this. It's been a challenge. I think I notice now where I need to really invest in my care before something. So I just went
Mm,
away to Vancouver and I knew that it was going to be a late event because of the time change. So it started at like 9 o'clock my time, went to 1 o'clock in the morning, which is I would never teach that late. So I
mm-hmm.
had to stay in bed all day and I had to just make sure I did that and had space to do that. So it's almost like I'm planning beforehand to
Yeah.
make sure that my capacity is at least as full as it can be. And I never used to do that for myself because I just thought, oh, I can do this and I can show up. And I would really take a hit in my body after that. And I know that's such a privilege and we don't all get to do that. Sometimes it's come to the point where I do have to cancel things. And say I don't have the capacity for this. So I've learned to use that language, and it's still really hard for me. Like when I've been in the hospital, sometimes I remember once I was in the hospital, it was really bad, and I had this huge circle, and there was like 50 people coming. Like at the time, it was so many people live, and I was like, I'm going to disappoint everybody. I'm
Hmm.
so terrified of disappointing all these people. But then my husband's like, you're in the hospital. Like it just, sometimes people have to say these things to me for me to
Yeah.
really, oh my goodness, right. And of course, people will be understanding. And I still dance with that sometimes. And
Hmm.
sometimes I show up, I'll be really honest, maybe not in the best place. Like I'm not feeling 100% that day or even 80%, but I know that that medicine will come through too. So whatever I'm moving
Mm.
through and transmuting, that's going to be medicine for what I'm offering as well. So I have to trust that now.
Glad you said that because I was also hearing when you were talking about being in the hospital and you had these 50 people, expecting to work with you, the medicine of disappointment. There's a deep medicine in being disappointed. I think for the one doing the disappointing,
Mhm.
for us to tend to our capacity to have let someone down because our body didn't allow us to move forward,
Mhm.
and a medicine for them. How do they hold their own grief that something went the way they didn't want it to go? And for me, having the healer fixer archetype, from a very young age, I don't know if I inherited it or created it. It's been such medicine for me to disappoint people and realize that I'm allowed to,
Mhm.
and to trust their resilience to move through the disappointment too. Right? How have you felt that as well?
Yes, I love that so much because truly, yes, there's so much medicine in that. And something that's so beautiful is um, being in communication with people after the fact and hearing what that did and also
Yes.
hearing compassion a lot of times where people say, well, of course, like I wouldn't want you to show up when you're not feeling well. Those things are really nourishing too, because
Hmm.
I operate that very much like that in the world where I yeah, I guess like when we have this co-creation, I hope that it's for all. It's for the person that's giving and receiving and all the things.
So we have to start closing, but I
Mhm.
want to close on a couple things. I want to kind of, the way we were talking about attuning to oppression and attuning to gifts, I want to attune the listener to your own pleasure and joy and health, not just your illness and pain and what. So tell me something, that you find is so pleasurable, like a practice, an experience of food. Like, what's the pleasure you have in your life right now?
Oh goodness. It's always dancing. It's
Mm,
always singing. It's always playfulness. Those things really bring me joy. If I get to, we used to have this game called Sing Star, and we could play it in my living room. And if I get to do that, if I could do that every day, we don't have it, but I would do that every day. I really feel like joy is my state. Like that's where it comes right from my heart. Walking through the forest brings me joy. Very simple things bring me joy, but
mhm.
definitely singing in the car, in the shower, and dancing. Yeah.
And I wonder what right now, what's really alive for you? Like what's your current muse, or what's something that's really in your body or in your mind, or that you're teaching about?
Well, what's been weaving is something that we've talked about today is I I'm thinking about a book proposal that's going to be expressed very soon. And it'll be what really weaves through is moving through the cycles and seasons of a chronic illness and moving through when you are in a flare, when you are feeling well, when you are letting things go, like just moving through all the cycles and the seasonality of that and how that expresses and how we live. I want to say well, but live well because, or live with joy, I guess, and connected to our hearts because the wellness industry typically has said, well, you're not enough unless you're healed or cured. And what I know to be true from 17 to now, which I'm 47 this year, 30 years of living with this chronic illness, is that I have lived well and I've
Mm.
learned and I've connected to the medicines of my ancestors and myself. And I continue to do that here on this planet. And I believe we all can. So I'm a model for that, I think.
I just have to underline, I have lived well.
Mm.
It's so easy to get caught up in this wellness trend of envisioning this better you. And I find it to be disturbing to the soils of self-love and the ability to connect to self where you are now and meet where you are now. If you're grasping for this better healed person, I've just stopped even believing in healed. I really understand this constant spiral of meeting whatever comes up endlessly until I leave this body. And then who knows what's going to come up then. So I think it's interesting to have lived well with illness, with pain, with trauma, with bliss, with pleasure, all these parts, rather than dangle this carrot in front of ourselves to say, I must get to my healing so I can be good. And if you would like to end on that, tell me where you go with that piece.
Oh, I love this. I'd say let's get rid of that dangly carrot. The dangly carrot, throw that out.
Throw it out.
Throw out
Throw
the
it out.
dangling carrot and sink into some of the most, and I know people write memes about them, but some of the most beautiful people I've met are the birch tree, where there's like that beautiful, beautiful birch bark and there's those scratches and the light just pours right
Mhm.
through that. Like I see that the depth that you've been through. If you are living with a chronic condition or illness, there's so much medicine there. Can you live with the medicine that dances within you and just know that you are so loved in that? I see you and I love you.
Well, I truly love you, Asha. Thank you. Thank you for everything you bring to my life off camera and on camera. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
That's the end of today's episode. Now let's take a moment to notice where we feel the episode in our bodies. Close your eyes. Take a breath. And let whatever wants to come up, come up. And remember, those sensations hold the wisdom that we're looking for. If you want to go deeper, visit holisticlifenavigation.com.